Trump has revealed when he will finally impose sanctions against Russia. Meanwhile, in Russia itself, they've come up with a way to make Russian women have more children. And Elon Musk is actually preparing a revolution in the USA. We'll talk about how our Western partners are stepping up their assistance to Ukraine. And I'll also tell you how artificial intelligence, speaking on behalf of Putin, addressed Russian first graders and told them a terrifying and frightening truth. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Let's figure it out. So, Putin and his team still can come up with a way to make Russian women have more children. But then, out comes cyborg Komsomol member Matvienko with a simply brilliant idea. She suggested, get this, bringing high-speed internet to villages in order to, attention please, lure young people out of the cities and boost the birth rate. So the Speaker of the Federation Council, Matvienko, stated at the opening of the Workers' Forum that it is precisely the rural areas that currently maintain their status as the country's demographic leaders. And according to Matvienko, the total fertility rate there is 16% higher than in the cities. Therefore, Matvienko decided that this brilliant idea needs to be implemented. This trend needs to be preserved, but in her opinion, people don't want to move to the countryside because there's no internet there. If high-speed internet is brought there, then all the young people will rush out of the cities and start having, 500 children at once in the villages. Well, in general, today I just took this news. It's telling of how the leadership of the Russian Federation thinks. That is, Matvienko said, today the internet is as much a necessity as electricity. And, the country inevitably degrades and slides into the abyss if dinosaurs from the last century are at the helm for decades. Putin doesn't use the internet at all. I remember when someone at a high-tech forum also asked, do you use the internet? And Putin started to demonstrate something. Yes, he said, I press the keys like this. And when he was asked which search engines he uses, Putin couldn't come up with an answer. He really doesn't know which search engines exist. He said, ours. But it's all clear, really. And as for Matvienko, she thinks that if you bring the internet to the village, of course, everyone will rush to have children. Basically, it's like downloading the internet onto a floppy disk and taking it to the village. Still, really, how sick are they, right? They don't want children so they can dance in circles and sing songs, but so they can go to war a bit later, just maybe in a different war. And let me remind you, Matvienko is a classic renegade. She was born in Ukraine, and she absolutely hates it with all her heart. By the way, she has repeatedly stated that the so-called impending attack on Ukraine is a lie with no basis whatsoever. She was saying this in 2021. Yes, I looked this up specifically for Matvienko. Specifically for the children, in Russia they counted more than 3,000 schools without sewage or running water. The most terrible situation is in Tuva. There, more than half of the schools have no sewage system. Well, can you even imagine that? I mean, there are trillions for the war. They keep insisting, come on, have more children faster. But where these children are supposed to study, there isn't even basic sewage. In second to last place are Dagestan and Yakutia, where 41% of educational institutions don't have proper toilets. Yakutia, they mine diamonds there, and there's timber. But it's just, instead of putting their own country in order, instead of providing some basic comforts for children, they send those trillions to war, in other words, to death. There's this classic... I recently gave you an example of how artificial intelligence drew a kind of hypothetical Putin. Everything he touches turns to decay, to mold, so it associated him with mold on the wall. Basically, there's always money for death, but never any for life. But Putin will keep declaring another year of the family and so on. The main thing is to make sure the kids survive until draft age, and after that, well, they'll figure out where to send them. And most importantly, to pump them full of propaganda from the school bench, or even better, from daycare, so that there are no questions at all about why you have to go die for Putin. And I have another piece of news here, just wonderful, coming right up, about the primer, a primer for children. On the first page of the new primers for first graders, they might include an address from Putin. I'll go even further. I asked artificial intelligence to compose this address from Putin to a first grader. I'll read it to you a bit later. I think you're really gonna like it. So that's the kind of initiative they've come up with, Putin's address in the primers, so that the child opens it right away. And there he is, Putin. Hello, my dear friend. Not only are these children sitting at the desks of heroes, I've already talked about this crazy, I don't know, some kind of idiotic tradition. Just imagine some criminal who used to study at this school, then goes off to fight in Ukraine, so that his sentence gets reduced or wiped clean. This criminal gets killed. He dies ingloriously somewhere in the fields of Ukraine, but no, they turn his desk into a hero's desk. That is, they stick an ordinary portrait onto the desk. There are these ribbons, stars, and the face of the criminal. And the children who are the best students are allowed, or rather are honorably moved to sit at this hero's desk. Can you imagine the trauma for a child from such a young age? A convict with 3 prison terms is staring at him and saying, soon you'll be here on the desk too. That's in the best case scenario, it's complete nonsense. So at first it was decided that Putin's address to first graders would be read aloud on September Honest by teachers and parents. But a little later, the child will read your words themselves. And this sense of pride from the fact that the president of the country addressed them personally will, of course, remain, and I am sure make the beginning of school life even more ceremonial. And you know what the vile genius of this system is? It's that even at home, parents can't, well, technically they can, but then someone will come after them, re-educate their child. They might say, listen, if it's a small child, that's Putin. He's a murderer, a bloody maniac. Everything they tell you in those conversations about important things is complete nonsense. In reality, this is how things really are. Ukrainians are defending themselves, defending their land, defending their cities. And that bold scum came and decided he wanted to go down in history. But the Ukrainians gave him a beating, so now he doesn't know how to get out of this war. That's how things really are, son. And the boy goes to school, and during some lesson, maybe a conversation about important things, he raises his hand and says, you know you're wrong. My mom told me that this is how it really is. And then some teacher, if you can even call her, that immediately presses that black button and the authorities come for that child's parents. That's the whole system for you. I mean, of course you can try to re-educate, but then you have to completely limit the influence of Russian society on that child. He shouldn't go anywhere or tell anyone anything. They'll take it away, deprive you of your rights, and then goodbye. There have already been plenty of such cases, so that's how it is. There will be some kind of special cover next, but let's move on to the address on behalf of Putin. I'm talking to this artificial ChatGPT. I say, do you know me? Based on what we've discussed as you see it, make an address for the first page of a primer for a school child. And here is Putin's address to the school child. My little friend, congratulations. You have taken your first step on a long journey. You have opened the primer, which means you have already begun preparing not only for your studies, but also for the life of a true citizen. Ahead of you lie many important tasks: to grow up obedient, strong, ready to follow orders, not to doubt, not to question, and, if necessary, even to do not for yourself, of course, but for the motherland. Or, to be more precise, for me, you may still be little, but your turn will come too. Because, as our most holy patriarch Kirill rightly says, children should be born not for pleasure, but for a great purpose, for war, for a holy war. So study, my young friend, read carefully, write neatly, and remember, if you were born, you already owe a debt to the motherland, to the army, to me. With faith in your duty, your president Vladimir Putin. Listen, obviously this has some Orwellian overtones, but it seems to me that if this address were actually published in a primer, no one would have any doubts about why it's like that. And really, it's a great address. Well, duty to the motherland, that is, if this address, after such indoctrination, appears in a Russian primary in 10 years, no one will question it, or the absurdity or meaning of this address. On to world news. I still haven't gotten over Donald Trump, and he just won't let up with his statements about Ukraine. Well, it's complete nonsense. Yeah, let them fight some more, let them die some more. Ukraine itself provoked Putin to strike. Well, basically, Kyiv wasn't taken because the tanks got stuck in the mud. In short, Donald Trump is going downhill fast. Here's the news. Trump didn't dare punish China for supporting Putin and the war. Oh, what a surprise. He didn't dare punish China. Now, here's what's newsworthy. It's that China is the main adversary of the United States. Well, that's clear enough. Trump wanted to scare them with tariffs, but it didn't really work out. But there is leverage after all. China is helping the Russian Federation, supplying components and dual-use goods. He could punish them, but no, even this well, it's like being handed a stick to beat your opponent with. To use Trump's own language, they're giving him a trump card, a card he could play. But no. So you really have to love Putin to not take advantage of this, even here. Besides that, Trump avoids directly criticizing China for this support, and at the same time is negotiating with Putin. Someday, we'll probably find out what kind of deal it was that Putin offered Trump. And the most interesting thing is that the sanctions, the very package of sanctions that Lindsey Graham announced he's proposing this package to punish those who buy Russian energy resources. But if Trump was even afraid to say this out loud, just so he wouldn't jeopardize some future deal, then how exactly is he planning to actually impose sanctions? What do you think? Well, Ukraine and its allies could still try to step up lobbying efforts in Congress right now. So, I think that another visit, say, by Macron, Scholz, or for example, Steinmeier to Ukraine, with an ultimatum to Putin, cease fire for 30 days. Putin would no longer have the tool of saying, all right, let's meet in Istanbul again. He simply wouldn't have that tool anymore. So if pressure is applied from all sides, including ramping up lobbying in Congress, especially among Republicans, I think it's possible. It really is. But if Trump, well, you know what he said? He said, everything is set up in such a way that now only I alone, personally, as they say, decide when the sanctions will be imposed. In other words, he's sending a direct signal to Putin, look, your fate is in my hands. And of course, to demonstrate that Ukraine is essentially the key to global security, otherwise, the day after tomorrow, that's it. You can already forget about Taiwan. And actually, probably the most effective tool we have is these covert operations against the Russian interests, like Webb and others. In other words, just start destroying everything we can reach, with the help of partners as well. And let them say, we had no idea, we didn't see anything, didn't know what was going on. In general, everything is clear with Trump. With every statement he makes, I get the feeling, that he's deliberately provoking, making these statements just so that Zelensky finally snaps and tells him off directly, straight up. And then he'll say, aha, see, he told me off. That's it. I'm offended. I'm getting up from the table. There will be no sanctions. That's the impression I get, just like that. Against this backdrop, Trump declares that if necessary, he will make a decision on devastating, terrifying sanctions against Russia. You know that meme? The little frog reading a book called How to Hit Someone Through a Phone Screen. Seriously though, if I decide, look at this wording, if I decide that Russia is not going to make agreements or stop the bloodshed, I will use this tool. I'll apply it if necessary. He's talking about sanctions. If I decide that Russia isn't going to stop the bloodshed, how do you figure that out? Come on, let's see. Problem from the Skanavi textbook. How do you figure out that Putin isn't going to stop the bloodshed? Maybe he keeps shelling Ukraine? Maybe he keeps up the pressure on the front lines? Maybe he's launching Shaheds and missiles. Maybe that's how you can figure it out. Maybe you just need to check the statistics in the morning, how many drones and missiles were launched, and how, unfortunately, new negative records are being set one after another. Yesterday, Kharkiv. More than 50 drones were launched at Kharkiv alone. Yeah, Ukraine and Russia need to be allowed to fight a bit more. But that is just the most insane phrase. This isn't a game of golf. Let them play a bit more. In this version, and really in this whole situation, the Democrats' position looks especially interesting. I mean, Trump is basically turning allies into enemies and vice versa, sanctions against allies, deals for enemies. But maybe all the Democrats are just frozen in some kind of shock. Maybe they're in a stupor and can't do anything. Well, maybe, of course, they're gathering a file for impeachment, but meanwhile, people are dying every day, homes are being destroyed every day, every single day. Well, it's good that not everyone is in a stupor. I've already mentioned that the United Kingdom will supply 100,000 various and very useful drones. France is launching drone production on Ukrainian territory, and it will be done by automotive defense enterprises. And these drones can be used, including some of them will be tested by the French themselves, conducting exercises and training. And part of them will be for Ukraine. So this is high-tech manufacturing, assembly, and so on. Well, France and the United Kingdom are clear. Germany as well. We received some good news not long ago. 4.5 billion in investments for the production of long-range missiles. But Ukraine needs missiles here and now. So the story with the Taurus missiles is fading away again. At the meeting with Trump, Merz was also rather silent. But someone who definitely isn't silent in the United States is Elon Musk. In fact, as I understand it, he's set out to turn the United States upside down to start some kind of revolution. He came up with the name for a new American political party. So his idea is, why should it just be Republicans and Democrats? Let's have some kind of centrist party that 80% of people would vote for. And so he came up with the America Party. Well, not bad, of course. There you go. He posted this on the social network X. I saw this news yesterday. As of yesterday, almost 6 million people had voted in this poll. Isn't it time to create a new political party? So basically, Elon Musk said, don't lump me in with the Republicans or Democrats. I don't want to. In that case, I'll just create my own party with blackjack and advisors. But Musk has already made Trump seriously nervous. The day before yesterday, I told you about this Epstein case. And Musk wrote that, in fact, Trump appears on Epstein's tapes. That's why they haven't been released. But you know what struck me the most? So, if you know that Trump is on Epstein's tapes, let me remind you, it's a horrific case involving the exploitation of minors, meaning engaging in things they should never even come close to, and so on. In short, it's a terrible case. Celebrities and royalty are involved. He even had an entire island there. And it turns out that Musk has information that Trump appears somewhere on those tapes. And he says, and he wrote, now that's a real bombshell. That's what he wrote. Good night, Donald Trump. Well, if you have this information, how is that even possible? Explain it to me. There's the FBI, there are intelligence agencies. Musk has information. So let's summon him then. Come on, show us what you've got. Isn't that how it's supposed to work? But instead it's like, if you behave yourself, I won't show the whole world what's on those tapes about you. What is this? Some kind of mockery or what? Yes. And moreover, when Biden was president and the Democrats were in power, they had the opportunity to investigate this. This isn't something that just happened yesterday. So what's going on? I always respond the same way when people say Trump is a KGB agent, Trump is Krasnov, he was recruited, then re-recruited. I say, well, fine, even if, let's say, Trump is a KGB agent. Obviously, he's not going to expose himself. But before him, there were the Democrats. Well, their intelligence agencies should have had this information too. Shouldn't they? It must. So, I can still understand some kind of compromise like this. He flew to Helsinki after being elected for his first term, had some kind of closed-door meeting with Putin, and came out looking lost and confused. There was no preparation for this meeting. It felt like his boss summoned him, gave him instructions, showed him some kind of folder and said basically, you're in trouble if you don't behave yourself. That kind of compromise could exist, but again, Western intelligence agencies earn their keep for a reason. And the same goes for the rumors about Putin's double. Obviously, they are different people. For example, the one who goes to the Kursk region, Putin himself would never go there in real life. Some younger looking guy shows up in the Kursk region. His face looks a bit off in a different direction. It's obvious here. But if you have such information, like Putin having surgery somewhere in Germany, there is DNA, well, then show it. Isn't that right? I don't know, maybe there's some kind of circle of conspiracy theorists who are keeping all these secrets to themselves until the very end. There's something else here. A lot of people from the US write words of support, and thank you so much for that. But do you know what bad thing Trump is doing? He's shaping attitudes not only toward himself, but toward the United States as a whole. And toward Americans, unfortunately, well, it doesn't always get separate. I understand, for example, and many of you understand that, well, Trump is not Americans. Well, at least not all Americans. But someone did elect him, right? In Canada, what was the reaction after that statement about the 51st state? They wanted to remove everything American from the shelves, everything, and get your stuff out of here as far away as possible. That's the kind of attitude, right?